All right, now we're going back into the Chumash and learning about the plagues that Moshe brought on Paro and all of Egypt. So let's learn. Right, so we saw that yesterday that Moshe did this miracle in front of Paro, and it really wasn't so much of a big miracle. He took his stick and he threw it down on the ground, and it turned into a snake. And Paro's magicians did the same thing, and they all turned back to sticks again. And Moshe's stick, or Aaron's stick, devoured their sticks. Right? That's what he said to do. So Vayechazek leiv Paro. What was the result? Paro's heart was strong, v'lo shamar lehem, and he wasn't very impressed by that their staffs ate up his magician staffs. Just like God said he wouldn't be impressed by it. So God says to Moshe, Kaved leiv Paro. Paro's heart is heavy. He's not going to send the people out. Don't worry. Right? Lechel Paro, Rashi says, Kvar Yakir, because it's the name of a thing. Okay, it's that. It says that his heart was heavy, even though that he saw the difference between the miracle that you made and what his magicians made, namely that your staff ate up theirs, but he wasn't impressed. So God says again, Lechel Paro, go to Paro in the morning, and he's coming out of the water. You should stand there and meet him on the edge of the river. He just spoke to Moshe alone, but you'll see. Coming out of the water, he's standing in the door. Take that stick that you turned into a snake, take that with you. Why is he coming out of the water? It says Rashi is coming out of the water, linakavav, to go to the bathroom. He went to relieve himself in the river. Why did he go into the river? Shahaya ose atzmo Elohai, because he made himself into a god. And he said, I never have to go to the bathroom. I'm totally pure. But what I do have to do is unite with the river to give the river power, because Paro said, I create the river. He went into the river and he would go to the bathroom over there. The Ibn Ezra doesn't exactly agree with this. He just says what Rashi says, that he made himself into a god. Ibn Ezra says that it's the custom of the kings of Egypt to go out every morning and to in the hot months of Tammuz and Av, because then the river gets bigger and it goes up many degrees, and they would go out into the river because the river was their god. That was the way to separate. So he didn't say that Paro made himself into a god. Anyway, God commanded the Moshe that he should go in the morning and stand over there on the river, and he should make the sign that the river would get smitten in front of Paro. And he said, take that stick that turned into a snake by means of Moshe, that he did that previously, and give it to Aaron in order to transform the waters of Egypt. The reason that Moshe didn't smite, we'll see, he didn't smite the rivers to make them into blood, because the river saved him. He says, give your stick to Aaron. Right? The Evan Ezra, if you remember before, he said that there was only one stick. Aaron didn't have a stick. He would take Moshe's stick, but others say not. So Paro will see with his own eyes that as soon as Aaron hit the water, it would transform to blood. In other words, he wanted, according to Ibn Ezra, the reason he said to go out and catch Paro when he was coming out of the water was his God. And he would go there, either that or he would just go there to cool off. But the water of the Nile River was the source of livelihood. That's where they got water from. And so he wanted God wanted Paro to see that it was Moshe's stick that transformed into blood. Because if not, Paro could have said, I just gone down to the river and say, what happened here? Right, what's going on? And they say, well, Moshe turned it into blood. I don't believe it. So he saw it himself that he did. Here's an interesting thing. It says, why does God say, take the stick that you turned into a snake? Of course, that's the stick that he turned into a snake. God told him that's the stick you're going to do the miracles with. He said, because Gam, that turned into a snake, Gam betinoso. In other words, also how it moved. V'yivla, when it swallowed up, Moshe ran in front of it. In other words, it's coming and reminding several things. First of all, that Moshe was a regular person. When he saw a snake, he ran away from it. It wasn't that he was, he just loved action. In fact, he didn't really want anything to do with the whole thing. Moshe was a holy person, and he was a man of principle. And God, he was a pure person, but he wasn't a person that was going to go and defile himself, going to Paro and making wars and everything like that. Even more, when the sticks turned into a snake, he ran away from it. So he said, take that stick and you're going to see that it's going to be good. Now, if you remember, we're learning in the Mimer in the morning that the reason in Torah that the reason God even told him to take the stick in the first place and do this trick in front of Paro with turning the stick into the snake and coming back again is just to show Paro that all of his power comes from holiness. And if he thinks that it comes from impurity, because of Paro was the big serpent, and his magicians also did the same thing. But Moshe's stick ate up theirs. So it's coming to show that really all the power of Paro and the power of magicians and sorcerers to do these acts of sorcery and things that are up there, it's forbidden. According to most opinions, it's forbidden for a non-Jew to do also this sorcery. Where do they get the power? It all comes from holiness. In other words, God is giving them the power so that they will have free choice to choose God. But it's not a war between two real powers to see who is strong. Paro essentially doesn't have a chance unless God wants him to. So this is what you have to say to Paro. You have to say to Paro like this: God, the power, the God of the Hebrews, Ivrim, that's the name of the Jews. Somehow or other, in English, it comes out to be Hebrews. I don't know why that came up, but that's what it is. Ivrim, Shalachani Elecha, sent me to you, and say, send my people v'yavduni b'midbar, and they will serve me. Now, this is a common misconception that Moshe came to Paro just to free the Jews, that they should just be free from Egypt. That was the whole purpose of Moshe, to get the Jews out of Egypt. But that's not so. It's really not so. The main thing of Moshe was not to get the Jews free from, but to get the Jews free to. Not just to be, while they were in Egypt, they couldn't serve God properly. And that's what he always said, let my people know, v'yavdun, and they will serve me. That was a big, in Israel, there used to be, I don't know how long it was already, there used to be the $10 bill. It used to be it had a picture of Golda Meir on it. They used to call it Golda. And it had that saying written over there on the side, Shalach et ami, let my people go. There was even a song about that, I think, a long time ago when I was a kid. Let my people go. Pharaoh, that Moses went to Paro and he said, "Let my people go." But that's only half of the picture. The purpose of going out of Egypt wasn't going out of Egypt. True, we call it Yetziat Mitzrayim. That's the main. That's called Yetziat. But the purpose of Yetziat Mitzrayim, even God said to Moshe at the burning bush that you're going to go out of Egypt and you're going to serve me on this mountain. This is where the Jews are going to get the Yavduni Baharazeh, that they'll serve me on this mountain. So the purpose of the Jewish people leaving Egypt was not just to go from, but it's to go also to receive the Torah. And then from the Torah, of course, to enter the land of Israel. In the land of Israel, to bring Mashiach eventually. That was the idea. So that's the idea. Moshe said, send my people out, Vayavduni, and they will serve me in the desert. In the desert. You didn't listen up to now. So let's see where it is. It says, what is it says the Orach Chaim, all of this is a little bit extra. It's really superfluous. All Moshe had to say was just the sentence which is after it. It says this sentence, Ko Amar Hashem, now you'll know that I am God. Behold, I'm going to smite with this stick that's in my hand the water, and it'll transform to dung. This is really what Moshe just sort of said to Paro. This sentence here is totally unnecessary. Right? God said to Moshe, but Omar Talabit says to Moshe, speak to Paro and tell him that the God of the Israelis sent me, and but you haven't listened up to now. What is it? What's the point? What was God telling him to do this? Here, just let's take the sentence out and just leave the sentence here. What? God says, go to Paro in the morning. He's coming out of the water. Take the stick and say, Omar Ta'alav, and you should say to him like this. Ko Amar Hashem, this is what God says. Right? You should know that I am God, and behold, I'm going to smite the river. And this thing is really extra. This whole sentence is extra. Right? That God says, say to Paro, this is exactly what he said to him. So he says the reason is, if you want to say, it's just to tell him who it's not necessary because he already knew it. No, maybe the reason is that he's going to go to the bathroom in the morning early. So Paro will say that this is not proper, that people will wait for me, that I should go back and sit into the palace. Therefore, God said, give him a good reason why I'm going now, right? That God commanded me to come to you now. Maybe that's a reason, said that he's explaining why I'm coming here. Why am I not going to the palace and waiting for you? Also, we can say another reason like this. It says in the prophet Yechezkel that it says that Paro, he's quoting Paro, saying, the river belongs to me and I make myself. I create myself. We had this in the Hasidic class this morning. What did Paro say? This whole river, that is the livelihood of Egypt, it's mine. And who made me? I made me. He made himself into a god. And he would fool his people to say that he was the one that that's providing for everything. He was the one that lets everyone into Egypt, and he's the one that the earth produces everything there is Paro. And he would go early in the morning in a quiet way so that no one would see, and he would go to the bathroom in the river. So therefore, somebody's coming, what? Yes. The other one, the Jews were bitten by his name. No, I mean, maybe you could make, very good question. You're asking the question later on. There's this story of the Nachash and Achoshet, that the Jews were Well, listen, the message that's given by the snake here of Moshe's staff is the same message as the staff that it was over there, namely that all the bad things in the world also come from God, and that God can change it anytime he wants to, but it depends mostly on our attitude. So Moshe was coming with the stick that was, and he wanted Paro to change his attitude. Over there in the desert, it says that the people were complaining, and God sent snakes to to bite them, kill them. So Moshe, it says, put a snake on this staff. I think that's also the sign of medicine now. Staff. Anyway, put the snake on this in order to make the Jewish people look to God. Here he wants Paro to look to God with the snake, the staff, and the that Moshe, that's the brass. What is it? The brass snake that Moshe put on the staff later. That was to make the Jews look up to God. But basically, you're right. It's the same. It's the same thing. Here, though, it's different because here God told him to take this stick and do all of the miracles with it. And there, the purpose of the stake with this staff that he made in the desert with the snakes, he didn't do any miracles with it. There were no miracles. But like I said, the purpose of it was the same: to get people, to direct people to look, to understand that God is the source of all of the snakes and all of the serpents and all the evil, and that to encourage people to why choose evil, choose the creator of evil, do good, right? Do what's good. But you're right, very good. It's a good connection. All right. So it says, that's what it says here. Paro said that he is really a god. So, and that everything that exists comes from him. So therefore, they waited for Paro to go into the river, to go to the bathroom, which was the ultimate sign of him fooling the people. And then they said, I'm coming, Paro, to teach you a lesson. The reason you're going to get all these plagues is in order to know that there's a God of the Jews. He's the one that sent me. In other words, to let him know where I'm coming from. Because if you think about it, it's like we said before, how in the world did Moshe get so close to Paro? He's Moshe and Aaron, all of a sudden they appear in the palace of Paro. Right? The Jews are supposed to be the ultimate slaves, and Moshe all of a sudden gets in the palace. How did that happen? So he says, this is what you should know, that God knows all of the secrets and what the people do, the most secret things. In other words, I'm coming here in the river to tell you that I know what you're doing in the river, and I am a representative of God. That's how I know what you're doing. And so you're not gonna escape from the Creator. And that I know that you're a big liar. And you haven't listened up now. He's letting to tell you that God knows all your thoughts now. And you're even now that Paro has nothing to say. And what did Paro say back? He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything, which I explained before, that Paro was completely speechless by this whole thing. Also, we can say another thing is that Moshe wants to say that this sign, that the snake, that the stick turned to a staff, and that the snake really, that wasn't one of the plagues at all. What he's coming to tell you, the underlying theme of all these plagues. This is the Or HaChaim we're learning here, Or HaChaim HaKadosh. The first plague was the one of blood. So he says, this is what's coming to tell you. I am the God of the Jews, and God sent me to you to speak to you. And you haven't listened to now. This is what God is saying. In other words, what is he trying to tell him? He's trying to tell him that the whole purpose of all of these plagues and everything is not just to let you out, not just to let the Jews out, but to let you know that there's such a thing as the God of the Jews, and that he creates the whole entire world. He creates you also. You haven't listened until now. This is what God said. Now you're going to know. I'm going to turn the river into blood. Okay, Rashi says, what does it mean to transform to blood? Because rain doesn't come down in Egypt. I don't know if that's true now, but it was then. The river used to go up and inundate and irrigate the whole entire land. The Egyptians, therefore, they worshipped the Nile River also, which is pretty logical. I mean, it's giving them their livelihood. They should say thank you to the river, right? Wrong. That's called idolatry. True, you should thank God for giving the river. They should, but they didn't do it that way. That wasn't it. Therefore, the river, it was the Yerushalayim, that was their God. And afterwards, he smote them. Because all the rest of the plagues were going to be like fleas and things like that. That really affected them deeply. But here, first of all, he's affecting the river, blood. Not only that, it says not only the river, but all the water in Egypt also. We'll see. Even people had water stored up, didn't help. One more. Okay, here we have a very interesting Kli Yakar, and he's going to explain all of the 10 plagues. He's going to explain the order, the logic behind all these 10 plagues. Or Chaim says one of the hints at this plague of the river turning into blood is that it wants to tell you that God, I am God. It wants this is the Or Chaim again. It wants to tell you that Yirtzeh Lomar Haya Hova V'Yiyah, that God is the creator of past, everything that happens in the past, everything in the present, and everything in the future. Also wants to tell us, that's why he said that I am God, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Also, he wants to let him know that with God's speech, everything exists. And what's going to be the proof? That when I hit the river with this stick, then Kishiyake Avdo Liyar Yereh Ki Hu Yisparech Hu Shosatiyar. That when God's servant hits this river, you're going to see that it's God that makes the river. Hu Mahaveh B'Kol Eit, that he's creating constantly. Lasher Yachpots, whatever he wants to. So Paro, you think that you're God? You don't create anything. Maybe you have the power in Egypt, and there were the magicians. There were magicians. They could do all sorts of tricks. But to create, you can't create anything. And I represent the God that's creating everything, including you. You know, God can do whatever he wants to. Now you see water, he can make a new creation. Instead of water, he's going to transform from the water, he's going to transform it to blood. Now, I don't know chemistry that much, but as far as I understand, water is inorganic chemistry, right? And blood is organic chemistry. You can correct me over there if that's true. If that's not true, I thought that water is H2O, right? And then what's blood? Blood has no. You can take all the chemicals you want to. You can't make blood. That's for sure. So it's a totally different type of creation, blood, than water is. And nevertheless, God said, now I'm going to take water and I'm going to make it into blood. Want to see me do it? This is the power of the creator of the universe. That's what he wanted Paro to know. Odorem is another hint, another the message that is hinted at here at Moshe turning the river to blood. Oh, there we go. Is God's mercy on his creations. When Paro sees that the river transformed to blood, Kadesha Tashuv But Tishlach, that all of a sudden, Paro said, hey, maybe I should just get rid of the Jews and I won't die. Ve'im loa yatzar rachmaim, if there wasn't any mercy, if God wasn't merciful, then huwa yamakeh bo umabdo. God would just kill Paro. And that's an easier way to get out of Egypt, right? All of a sudden, Paro dies. There's no leader. All the Jews can just get up and leave. Kol v'chomer, much more so, Ma Yor Gadol, this huge river, that it is the sustenance of all of the Egyptian people. Mahavchol Adam, God can transform it to blood as Adam, a person, Amagushi, a physical person, Kamoto, like Paro, lo kol shekin, how much more so? If God can turn the river to blood, then God can turn me into water. That's what he says. Now you're going to know that I'm God. I am mitchakem alecha b'devarim gadolim kazu shel hakat elokim kadesh tamin v'lo tabed. I want you to smarten up, Paro. I want you to realize that God has all the power and that God is giving you a big chance here. He's giving you a big opportunity. He could have just killed you right off and not asked any questions. But God wants you to learn the lesson and send the Jewish people. All right, let's just do a little bit of this Kli Yakar here. All right. Ko Amar Hashem bezos teda. With this you will know that I am God. This was said in the first plague, in the order of the plagues. Okay, what is the order of the plagues? We say it in the night of the Seder. It's a Dom, Tzfardea, Kinim, right? And then Aru, Datzach, Adash, Dever, Aru, Dever, and Shechin, and boils. So there's blood, frogs, and fleas. That was the first three plagues that were sent onto Egypt. Okay, again, you can say, well, that's pretty cruel. On the other hand, you can say it's not cruel at all. And if God wanted to, he could just killed all the Egyptians. They just all would drop dead, or all the men or something. And then that would be very simple. The Jews could just take all the money and everything and leave Egypt. Wouldn't even more. The Jews could have taken all the money and just stayed. The Jews could have stayed and they could have become the leaders. But everyone was dead. That's the way God could have done it if he wanted to. That sort of gives a little bit of a justification for those 4/5 of the Jewish people that didn't want to leave Egypt. They wanted to stay back in Egypt. I mean, it's pretty logical that they would want to stay back in Egypt. First of all, they grew up there. It was their home. True, they suffered, but still, that's all they knew was Egypt. And not only they grew up there, but their father grew up there, and their grandfather, and their great-grandfather. 4 generations were there. Dor Ravi, Yeshuvu Hainatzes. So they already had Egyptian mentality, and they've been breathing Egyptian air and eating Egyptian food or whatever for 210 years. So, and now all of a sudden they have a chance to be the masters. They could do to the Egyptians what the Egyptians did to them. That's what God should have done, right? Said, but I think God knows a little bit better, and he decided not to do this. God decided he wants the Egyptians to make free choice, to choose to let the Jews go. So he says, that's the order. Listen to this. The order is blood, frogs, and fleas. The Cain of Makkah Rishon, the first one was the Cain b'Makkah Rishon, and also in the second 3, which was Arov, Dever, and Shechin. Right? Mixed up animals, all sorts of wild, crazy animals attacking everybody. There was some sort of a plague that came into everyone. Dever and a Shechin, which was boils. Also, in the first one of both of these sets of three. The first one, it says, in order you should know that I am God. Bekirav Oretz, in the ground. And also the same thing in the first plague of the last four. Right? Barad, what is it? Skip my mind. What's it called? Is hail. It says there's hail with fire inside of it. Or if there was weird a plague with arbe, with locusts. Okay, the first of these was the barad. By the first of this one, it also says, in order you should know. So in other words, 3 times God tells Moses to tell Paro, I'm bringing these plagues in order you should know that God is, namely the plague number 1, plague number 4, which is the beginning of the second set of 3, and plague number 7, the first of the last 4. It says, in order that I should know. Ki en kamoni, that you should know there's nothing like me. And also the Mari Nitor Alze was Mari. I forget, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. And he explains that Paro was what was Paro? Paro disagreed with 3 things. This is in order that Paro should recognize God. That Paro did not recognize. Okay, now what is God? Was God supposed to recognize? What was Paro supposed to recognize? Paro was supposed to recognize, like, what is God? What is God? What's wrong with not believing in God? It's such a terrible thing. Let him live his life. He says, no, you have to understand. Believing in God is an essential thing. Is it essential? God, like I say, is creating us. He's keeping us alive. He's creating the whole world. He's enlivening the whole world. But that's step number 1. The main thing is he's creating everything for a purpose. And one of the main purposes is that we should make the right choices, Jew and non-Jew. So first of all, you have to recognize that there is such a thing, if you want to call it, as a creator. So Paro totally disagreed with everything. And we're going to see how many levels of godliness he disagreed with. The first thing is Metzius Hashem, that God exists. Who says there is such a thing? Ki kachash, that he denied that there is such a thing as God. Lo yadati et Hashem. He said, I don't know, what are you talking about, a creator? I'm God. Therefore, he said in the first, now you're going to know that I am God. The second thing about Paro says, okay, listen, even if you want to say, Moshe, I see you're a serious person, even if you want to say that there is God, okay, good. But maybe God doesn't care about the world. God exists, and it doesn't care about the world. It's something like, I mean, if you learn Hinduism basically, it's the same thing as like Spinoza and these people thought, that God exists. God is some sort of a force, and some sort of a supernal, amorphous force level of consciousness or something like that. But he doesn't care about us and what we do. Right? God isn't involved in all these different, God's too high. So that was the second problem with Paro. Paro said, okay, Moshe, listen, even if you want to say there is God, but God doesn't care about details. Therefore, he said, on the second plague, he said, I am God within the earth. That's what he said in the second set of plagues, second set of 3. Another thing that Paro said is that even if God does exist, like you say, and even if he does care, but he's not able. Yocholat Hashem lomar she'enu yochol l'shanot hateva. And that God is one power and the world is another power, and God can't change nature. Right? Maybe God exists. Maybe God can give you good luck. He can give you, keep you healthy. But to change the way the world is, to change things, God can't do that. Therefore, it said, in the third set of 3, so there's nothing like me. In other words, God can do whatever he wants. So those are the 3 aspects of Paro, that namely that God doesn't exist, no such thing. And even if you want to say that he exists, so he doesn't care. And even if he does care, he hasn't got the power to change anything. And Moshe came with the plagues to show him how wrong he was. And the reason why it was so important that Paro should know this, because everyone is supposed to know it. Every human being is supposed to know what happens if people don't know it. So you get a very cruel world, a very cruel and seemingly meaningless world. And God doesn't want that. He wants there to be a good world, but he wants there to be a world where we have free will. We act properly. And that's the whole story of the going out of Egypt. And we'll talk about, God willing, more tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming. Hope to see you tomorrow at 8:15. Together with Mashiach now.